One of my friends works in the metro, and it was he who told me this amazing story over a cup of beer. Subway workers, especially those who work around the tracks, encounter many strange and mysterious things. Even huge rats do not cause surprise, as do the torn, bloody scraps of clothing that are sometimes found. Sometimes, they claim to see ghosts in underground corridors, but no one believes such stories for a long time, dismissing them as the results of the rich imagination of witnesses. However, in the most ancient tunnels, there is something strange and inexplicable, quite frightening. This can be seen between the 3rd and 4th hours of the morning, usually at around 200 meters from the beginning of the tunnel. Subway workers, who ironically nicknamed this phenomenon "strange train," are trying to get rid of the fear of the unknown with mocking statements. But the fear here is certainly not in vain. After the subway closes, trains stop moving and the contact rails are turned off for the safety of trackmen. Thus, no trains travel on the tracks while the tunnel teams are working. However, linemen sometimes see a bright headlight deep in the tunnel, similar to the front headlight of an old train or locomotive, accompanied by the characteristic noise of a moving train. This something is quickly approaching them, forcing them to jump to the side, and the one who does not have time disappears without a trace. If you manage to move away from the path of the strange train and close your eyes, you can remember its appearance. These features were identified by trackmen through experience. In each group of metro workers, there were those who reacted differently to the mysterious creature. Some froze in fear and disappeared. Some jumped away and closed their eyes, and some kept their eyes open but lost the memory of the meeting. During the discussions, it became clear how to behave correctly in a collision with the strange train. But there was another way to escape the strange train, preserving the memory of the meeting and remaining unharmed. This method was discovered by a young guy who worked in the subway for only a month. Apparently his name was Steve, but they don't remember exactly. He heard legends about the strange train, but did not believe in them, mocking his colleagues. However, one day he encountered this strange phenomenon. Seeing the headlights of an approaching train, the guy got scared and did something completely unexpected. He raised his flashlight above his head and shouted, "I'll crush you," and ran towards the strange train. The mysterious creature disappeared before reaching him by 5 meters, as if frightened. The light of the lantern allowed Steve to see the strange train. Behind the burning headlight there was something dark, similar to smoke, which had become physically tangible. This extreme act has become an effective method, and now someone tries to use it from time to time to get a closer look at the mysterious creature. However, other than Steve's stories, no one had seen anything like this. The strange train still disappears 5 meters before the person running towards him. Some linemen still sometimes disappear due to the strange train, but such cases are rare, and the metro management carefully hides such incidents. Who or what is strange train remains a mystery. A ghost train or an ancient creature living underground? Where do the trackmen who get caught in the path of the strange train disappear? Lots of unanswered questions. What do you think about this? During my student years, I worked around the metro during night shifts, but my stay there was quite short-lived. During this year, or a little less, I don't remember the exact amount of time, unusual events happened to me, one of which I will tell you now, after which I immediately left my job. In general, the work was not so dusty. After the metro is closed to passengers, life there continues to be almost as active. Various services work: cleaners, technicians, electricians, linemen. In general, a lot of different people. But it's not that important. The lineman's job is to check the condition of the track and detect faults after the subway is closed. I went on shift. Everything was on schedule. I checked the flashlight, the radio, just like that. We joked a little with our colleagues, smoked, and went our separate ways. The first stage passed unnoticed. I was thinking about something of my own. I don't remember exactly. I walked through it without stopping. The second stage also went by quickly. I remember whistling something. These were short stages. I covered several of them in an hour. There was another one ahead, longer. It was Station 6. I passed it, entered the tunnel, and literally 100 meters later, the light from the station was still illuminating the tunnel. I heard footsteps from behind. My heart sank. I quickly turned around, illuminated the figure with a flashlight in my hand, and shouted, "Who are you?" At the same time, I thought maybe it was the cleaner or someone else. After a couple of steps, when I had better light, I recognized this figure. It was Mark, an ordinary guy from another shift. Cheerful, joker. We even had fun in the locker room a couple of times after work, but in general I didn't communicate with him that much. "Mark, is that you?" I scream, and he comes up to me and says, "Hello." Mark was like Mark, only he was kind of pale. I noticed this right away and said, "You look a little pale, Mark." He mutters something, saying he took too much yesterday. I ask him what he is doing here. He says that he just went around one tunnel, and at 6 there were some breakdowns. The guys were working there, and he thought that he would come in to help, to hang out. And then from the platform he sees me coming, and decided that he will come with me. It's more fun for two. In general, something like this. All I remember from this conversation is that we mostly walked in silence. Perhaps the man has a headache from yesterday and is not in the mood to talk, I thought. Nothing strange. I only remembered that Mark complained a couple of times that he was cold. In general, the subway is always cool, but these words somehow especially stuck in my memory. We reached 7. Mark said that he would go into some room there. They said goodbye and went their separate ways. The time was approaching the end of the shift. In half an hour, they would turn on the power to the rails. I did my job, told the dispatcher that everything was in order, washed myself, and went to the hostel with a feeling of accomplishment. Everything seemed fine. The next night I came back to shift again. My friend asked me to change, and it was the same shift that Mark worked. In the locker room, Jacob asks me if I remember Mark. I replied that, of course, I remember. And he tells me, the day before yesterday he died. The funeral is tomorrow. I'm kind of upset. I feel sorry for the guy. I ask what happened. Jacob says it looks like a heart attack. A neighbor found him at home this morning. And then it was as if I got an electric shock. Are you saying he died? Day before yesterday? I ask. Yes, Jacob answers. I ask again and say that last night I walked with him through the tunnel. Jacob somehow doubts. Maybe I'm drunk. More guys enter the room and ask if we have heard about Mark. When he died, I almost scream. On Tuesday, the day before yesterday, I sat down. Then everything became somewhat hazy in my memory. The guys asked something, looked at me with concern. It was clear that I didn't look very good. Someone seemed to ask if everything was okay, what happened. So I quickly ran to the shift manager, shouting for him to give me an application form and that I no longer wanted to work in the tunnels. He also shouted for me to go home and get some sleep. Then somehow suddenly we both fell silent, and the boss asked so carefully what had happened. I look at him seriously and only say, yesterday I saw him. I walked with him until 8. After a while, without saying a word, he took my shaking statement and made a sign to me with his hand. I realized that I was allowed to leave. In general, I was scared half to death then and drank for a week after that. I didn't go to Mark's funeral. It was scary. Who was I even going with? That's it. To be honest, I debated for a long time whether it was worth sharing this story. However, what happened to me personally when I was about 21 to 22 years old. All details are stored in memory in the smallest detail. As I already noted in the previous story, at that time I lived in Detroit and often changed rented apartments. Finally, I found a permanent place, which was quite fun, since I shared it with 2 other friends. We had fun, explored the world around us with amazing speed, including the world of the mysterious. At this time, I discovered heavy metal and the associated style of clothing. Biker jacket, pants, belts, chains, Cossack boots, and of course, a felt hat. Even now, this hat is a relic lying at home. So I, all in this beautiful and stern appearance, wandered around the diverse Detroit in search of people like me in spirit. And she found it. This is actually a short introduction for a better understanding of the situation. One beautiful spring evening, when the nights were already beginning, I was returning from a party. The appearance described earlier was complemented by a heavy bag with books and videotapes. The metro was still open, but the escalators were no longer working. Cleaning workers hung out on the platforms. Trains arrived at long intervals, and orange vests flashed by with buckets and rags. Everything was getting ready to close. The train I was traveling on stopped at Shakespeare Station. Next, I needed to go to the Tvorcheskaya station, located at the end of the platform. Everything is quiet around. Everything is calm. Few travelers on the platform took their seats. I was heading towards the transition to Tvorcheskaya station, holding a heavy bag in my hands and thinking about my own things. I was the only one at the crossing. Suddenly, with my peripheral vision, I notice a dark figure just a meter from me to the left. The thought instantly comes to mind. Gopnik, damn him. In such situations, these types of people usually show their intellectual outstanding side and courage in front of others, no matter who is in front of them. I tightly clutch my bag of books and tapes in my hands, preparing to defend myself. And the attack is not long in coming. I feel something forcefully stepping on my foot, or rather, on the heel of my boot. So hard that I almost fell. Usually people of this type do this on purpose to throw the person off balance. With the bag in my hands and waving it, I quickly turn around to repel the attack. But instead of a Gopnik, there is emptiness in front of me. I stand in a stupor, scratching my turnip under my hat. My eyes widened. The question in my head is, what just happened? But there's no one around. No one walked. No one ran away. Everything probably happened in just 3 seconds. Not more. Almost instantly. In any case, not a single Gopnik or anyone else could escape from me unnoticed. From the outside, it looked like this. A metal girl is walking, suddenly stops, turns around, waves her bag, and moves on in surprise. Then I get home without incident, but I discover that the tread on the boot where I was stepped on is broken. And besides, the heel hurts terribly. I heard one theory that your death always follows you to the left, at arm's length. Here is what Carlos Castaneda wrote about this. Death is our eternal companion. It is always to the left of us at arm's length, and death is the only wise advisor who is always next to the warrior. When a warrior feels that everything is going awry, and he on the verge of failure, he turns to his left and asks his death if this is so. And death replies that he is mistaken, and except for his touch, there is nothing that really matters. Death says, but I have not touched you yet. I am not asserting anything, and I'm not imposing anything on anyone. I'm just sharing what happened. This happened in those years when, as a student, I worked part-time as a cleaner in the metro. Yes, it's not the cleanest or easiest job, but after climbing onto a scrubber machine, you drive for a couple of hours. And that's it, you can go home. However, there is only one drawback: working at night, when everyone else is resting in their beds, and you, like Cinderella, are working. And although you don't really strain yourself, the head of the service monitors the quality of cleaning and ensures that you don't sleep. My responsibility included 2 stations and the transfer between them. Sometimes I had to go down into the technical tunnel with a maintenance crew to remove debris and check that everything was in order. They paid extra for this, and I gladly followed the instructions of the station duty officer, who noted the time spent on the stretch. One night, while finishing cleaning the platform, I was asked by electricians to remove debris in the technical tunnel where they were changing the lighting. The garbage turned out to be not far from the platform, apparently blown by the wind from the electric trains through the slightly open gateway. I agreed and headed into the tunnel. Having descended into a narrow tunnel, he hardly pushed aside the heavy door and moved forward, passing by the walls, almost touching them with his shoulders. After about 30 steps, I found an old plastic fast food bag. I pick it up and suddenly, in the corner of my eye, I notice a tall worker in a dirty overall, similar to the one shown in old photographs of the safety instructions. It was strange because there usually wasn't supposed to be anyone in those places. Even the repairmen showed up here once a year with their carts. Pedestrians were strictly forbidden to be here without permission and paperwork. Who is this? As I approached, I noticed that the worker's hair was disheveled. His eyes were sunken, as if they were not there at all, and his face was covered with rough wrinkles and pockmarks. On his chest was a badge that looked like the explosive symbol found on occupational safety posters. He looks like an ordinary person, but a slight shiver of fear ran down my spine. The overalls have cracks and a cracked badge. What kind of creature? Suddenly, he slowly raises his hand and points behind me. Turning around, I am horrified to discover that a repair trolley is rushing towards me. She quickly approaches, emitting an indignant signal, and rushes where that strange worker stood. I jump to the side and barely have time to hide in the safety pocket, and the trolley flies past with noise and grinding. It didn't hit me, it just stunned me with the wind. The trolley driver later wrote in his explanatory notes that I, like a circus performer, jumped up and gracefully turning around in the air half a meter from the trolley bumper, flew into the shelter head first. Maybe it was a circus act, but I don't remember exactly. For a minute I stood, catching my breath, with my nose pressed to the concrete wall. Well, I think you can shit yourself anyway or start stuttering. Then I remember the shaggy guy warning me. He was definitely there, standing on the rails, where there is not even a pocket, and it is impossible to dodge the trolley. It's too crowded. I approach, but find nothing. No blood, no crushed bones, as if no one was there. And the trolley didn't even stop. She rushed past and disappeared like refined sugar in a glass. Bad sign. Maybe another one to go. Therefore, for the second time, I decide not to tempt fate. From there, I break down so quickly that my ears are blocked, and I immediately start arguing with the electricians. What kind of stuffy dogs didn't warn you that the trolley was coming? Disgusting shit. And they immediately begin to widen their eyes in surprise. Like alive. It's like I'm from another world. They say that the duty officer gave the order to release old trolleys from distant tracks, and we did not have time to warn. And you ran away, and the radio died. Not this way. I press the radio buttons. My radio is silent. It's really dead. These electric types are jumping around me. They thought that everything was dead, but here I am, whole. One even tries to hug me, reeking of fumes. I kick him in the face. He smelled like a wet flea beetle, and I'm not a fan of male hugs. Later, I was told that these losers simply forgot to stop traffic and call me when the trolley rushed past them. There was simply no chance of salvation. I shout at them that there was a living person there, and the only pocket where I squeezed in. The foul smell mixes with the pungent smell of medical gloves. They definitely need to check if I am a drug addict, not drunk, and if I have failed a medical test. I want to remain silent, but I begin to snap and throw words at them. In the end, the matter gets to the top management, and a squad of evil nukers is sent. They needed to thoroughly investigate this incident as part of their duties. In general, there was quite a scandal. Fact, I was in the technical tunnel without approval, without safety instructions, without permission, and this is absolutely contrary to all standards and rules. The station duty officer was given a reprimand and a fine, and the electricians were transferred to auxiliaries. The trolley driver was sent for recertification for exceeding the speed limit, but I was simply quietly fired. Who the worker in the torn boots was remained a mystery, despite all efforts. He could not pass unnoticed. There are cameras and security everywhere. And there are no additional passages. There is a closed dead end there, and no strangers will go there at night. Mystery. But nevertheless, if not for this creepy stranger, I might not exist. Much later, I watched a program about supernatural phenomena in the subway, and they said that from time to time in unexploited places, the ghost of a worker who died in the 30s appears. They even described him. Tall, shaggy, covered in rags. Was it really him?